Positive consumption externalities refer to external benefits on society created by consumers creating goods and services. One common example of a positive consumption externality would be vaccination. So think about COVID and think about your COVID-19 vaccination, for example. Not only does this benefit the single individual who's getting vaccinated, but it also helps to slow the spread of COVID around society as a whole. Society as a whole will benefit when more and more individuals get vaccinated against COVID-19. Therefore, the social benefits of getting vaccinated becomes larger than the private benefit of an individual getting vaccinated. So this explains how positive consumption externality is an externality. We call vaccination a merit good, which, if you recall, is the opposite of a demerit good discussed in the earlier videos. So merit goods are desirable to consumers, but they are often underproduced by the market relative to what is socially optimal. This particular diagram you see on the screen illustrates our example. The first point you want to take note is that the quantity that is actually produced in the market is lower than what is socially optimal. So this is reflected over here when you see QM is lower than QOPT. Similarly, as we have discussed in the previous video, the price at which the market sets is higher than the socially optimal price. And in terms of the two benefit curves, this time the curves being benefit curves because it is a consumption externality, we see how the benefit to society, MSB, is higher than the benefit to the individual person. So in the context or in the example of a COVID-19 vaccination, the overall benefit to society is larger than the overall benefit to the single individual who's getting vaccinated. Once again, the gap between both MSB and MPB curves are reflected in this yellow bar, which is really the size of the externality. So the key takeaway for this particular diagram is that when there is a positive consumption externality, the free market underallocates resources to the vaccination of society as a whole. So too little vaccines are consumed relative to what is socially optimal for the overall society to benefit. And this is reflected once again along 2 points of this diagram. The first one is how QM is lower than QOPT, as indicated by that gap. And the second point is how your MSB is lower than your MSC at the quantity which the market is producing, which is over here. So once again, this results in a welfare loss because not as many people is getting vaccinated as what is required to be socially optimal. That's the logic, basically. And the welfare loss is reflected in this diagram as this green triangle, this green shaded area. So overall, there are two key takeaways to remember when discussing positive externalities, be it positive production externalities or positive consumption externalities. The first key takeaway is that positive externalities always stem from the underproduction of a good, which results from the underallocation of resources to that good's production. For example, if you think about open source AI models, or if you think about vaccination, these things are usually underproduced relative to what we consider socially optimal. And as a result, when there's a welfare loss, the welfare loss triangle always points to the right because the market underproduces that particular good. And this is in contrast to what we have learned for welfare losses in negative externalities when the welfare loss triangles always point to the left because the good is overproduced by the free market. The second key takeaway to remember for positive externalities is that positive externalities can result from actions by either producers or consumers. As with negative externalities, when we discuss the actions made by producers, we discuss these in terms of cost. So usually in the diagram, it is the MPC and the MSC curves which are affected. And the demand curve usually stays the same. But when we discuss the actions and decisions made from the point of view of the consumer, we discuss them in terms of benefits. So in the diagram, it is usually the MPB and MSB curves that are affected while the cost curves stay the same, just like how you're looking at this particular screen.